Learning America by Luma Mufleh. First Chapter Friday Read Aloud video for teachers.
Hi, my name's Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. I've been sharing books with y'all for about 4 years, every week telling you another great book that I think you're going to love. And this week is no different because I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it a bit differently because students, for the first time ever, this video is not for you. That's right, teachers, it's for you. I'm going to be reading from Learning America by Luma Mufleh, a book that I just finished reading, and I thought, gosh, I have to tell teachers about this book, and what better way than to do it in a First Chapter Friday. So if you're a teacher, stand by, hang on, keep listening. If you're a student, go back to my channel and pick out something else. It's not that things in this book are inappropriate, it's just that you're not the intended audience. So yeah, go on. See you later. Have fun. Happy reading. And teachers, stick around. Here we go. So I went on a work trip last week and I had a lot of airplane reading time, and I just devoured this book about refugees in our country. And I thought that there is so much value in it and things that we can learn, even if we aren't teachers of refugees, even if we don't have a large refugee population in our town, um, even if that is not our life experience or our classroom experience, there's still so much I learned from reading this book about how to teach students who have experienced trauma, how to engage students and parents in a school community. Those are just two of the many, many major takeaways I took. I'm going to read you the blurb so you have just an overview of this true story, and then I will read you chapter 1. It was a wrong turn that changed everything. When Luma Mufleh, a Muslim gay refugee woman from a hyper-conservative Jordan, stumbled upon a pickup game of soccer in Clarkston, Georgia, something compelled her to join the game. The players, 11 and 12-year-olds from Liberia, Afghanistan, and Sudan, soon welcomed her as a coach of their ragtag but fiercely competitive group. Drawn into their lives, Mufleh learned that few of her players, all local public school students, could read a single word. She asks, "Where was the America that took me in, that protected me? How can I get these kids to that America?" Learning America traces the story of how Mufleh grows a group of kids into a soccer team, and then into a nationally acclaimed network of schools for refugee children. The journey is inspiring and hard-won. Fugees school accepted only those the most in need. No student passes a grade without earning it. The failure of any student is the responsibility of all. Soccer as a part of every school day is a powerful catalyst to heal trauma, create belonging, and accelerate learning. Finally, this gifted storyteller delivers provocative, indelible portraits of student after student making leaps in learning that aren't supposed to be possible for children from backgrounds of extreme trauma. Stories that shine powerful light on the path to educational justice for all of America's most left behind. This book is filled with things that I have underlined, takeaways that I wanted to take with me. And I know that you're going to find so much value in this book. So settle in as I read you chapter 1 of Learning America by Luma Mufleh. Chapter 1 is titled, "Why Don't You Go Back?" My grandmother completed the 7th grade. That was the end of her formal education. She was married at 15 and a mother at 16. Over the next 5 years, she gave birth to 4 more children. None of this was unusual for a middle-class family in Damascus, Syria, in the late 1950s. In 1964, when my grandmother was pregnant with her 6th child, everything changed. Syria was shaken by civil unrest that was followed by a violent military coup. Soldiers occupied nearly every corner of Damascus's ancient streets. Syrians were pitted against one another, urban against rural, merchants against farmers, brother against brother. This is what a civil war does. It unstitches the fabric of a country and tears apart the colors and textures that made it beautiful in the first place. She didn't need a diploma to know that something was very wrong now, that she could no longer keep her children safe. Call it a survival instinct or a mother's special way of knowing, whatever it was, it made her, pregnant belly and all, pack 5 children into the family car and drive away from the only home she had ever known. Only 120 miles separate Damascus and Amman, but they were the difference between life and death. My grandfather stayed behind, believing that things would blow over like the time before and the time before that. There had always been unrest, talk of change. There was no reason for alarm, he insisted. Surely his wife and children would be back soon. Instead, 2 months later, my grandfather followed the same dusty highway to Amman. His factories had been seized by the government, his brothers had been tortured. Syria was unrecognizable, a police state. My mother, my grandmother's firstborn, was 16 years old when the family fled to Jordan. Her whole world had been taken away. The country she loved, the extended family and the apartment building they all shared, her school and her friends. For a while she told herself that the move was just temporary, that they would stay in Jordan for a few months and then return to Damascus. Surely things would go back to normal. But at her parents' insistence, she enrolled in school in Amman. It didn't go well. Classmates and teachers alike mocked her French-inflected Syrian accent, her halting English. Jordan, having been colonized by the British, was an English and Arabic-speaking society, while neighboring Syria primarily spoke French and Arabic. To this day, my mother understands English perfectly well, but refuses to speak it in almost every setting. Even though Jordan and Syria share a border and many cultural similarities, my mother was immediately identified and treated as other, as different, as less than. At first, she fought back. She told her classmates that Syria was the better country anyway. Then why don't you go back? They retorted. After a few months, she refused to go to school. My grandparents didn't know what to do. They weren't going to let her drop out. They were committed to making sure every one of their children had an education, something fairly rare in their region at the time. Please go to school today. It will get better. Just give it time, they begged. I won't. I hate it there. Why can't we go home? Please, let's go home. My grandparents were torn. My mother was unhappy, but she was safe. She was in school, but she was not learning. They had made it out of Syria unlike so many of their neighbors, but would they ever truly belong in this new place? They eventually gave in and sent my mother back to Syria to finish high school. She would live with her aunt for 2 years until she graduated and returned to Jordan. That was the plan. For a brief moment, things were as good as they could be for her. She was without her siblings and her parents, but she was home. She returned to her beloved Catholic school, overjoyed to see the teachers and friends she had left behind. My mother's return to normalcy was short-lived. The regime began shutting down all non-government schools. She remembers standing on the playground as she watched armed soldiers march the nuns out of the building as if they were criminals, these women who had taught her how to read and write. She remembers the moment when she and her classmates ran to them, begging them not to go. The soldiers tried to place their rifles between the girls and the nuns, but the teenagers would not be deterred. They were determined to say goodbye at least. Syria would never be the same. I was born in 1975 in Amman, a place constantly in the crossfire of regional violence. I don't remember a time during my childhood when there wasn't a conflict swelling or a war unfolding in a bordering country. Because of my family's wealth and Jordan's good relationship with the United States, we enjoyed some semblance of normalcy. But the drums of war always beat steadily in the background, and we knew implicitly that our lives could be upended overnight. My parents put me in an Arabic speaking school when I was 5. I think they did it to resist the lingering colonialist influence in the region, the idea that the West things did things better than everyone else. They were fiercely Arab. Sending me to an Arab school in many ways was an act of patriotism. But as with most parents, their commitment to an ideal went only as far as their own child's well being. After a teacher struck me with a ruler for speaking out of turn, my mother immediately pulled me out of the school. I began attending a school run by the British Embassy. My first few weeks were difficult, to say the least. In my family, we spoke only Arabic. All of a sudden, I was sitting in a class where instruction and conversation happened completely in English. The only kids I had ever interacted with were Arab kids. Now my classmates were from all over the world: Japan, India, England, Nigeria, Scotland, Switzerland. Unlike my old teachers, these teachers didn't wear a hijab, and their skirts ended at the knee. My PE teacher wore shorts. I would come home complaining of pounding headaches, telling my parents that I just wanted to go to sleep. My mom was worried that she was watching her daughter relive her own terrible experience. She would ask my dad if they should consider switching me again. Just give it time. She's young, he would reassure her. For a while, I faked my way through. I excelled in and loved the classes that didn't require me to speak English. In art, I could draw by copying what the teacher was showing us. In PE, I could run and throw a ball without having to say a word. And in music, I could sing at the top of my lungs because I was simply imitating a sound. What the song meant, I had no idea. Eventually, through total immersion and the dedication of truly wonderful teachers, I began to learn English. I began to love school. I attended a British dual language middle school and went on to an American high school. When I was applying to college, British and American universities were the only ones I considered. I believed very strongly that Western education was the best the world had to offer, and that everyone who lived in those countries had received an education like mine. I thought that the disrespect and patriarchalism my mom had experienced in her Amman school didn't happen in developed countries. In addition to her aversion to English, my mother still bristles when I call her a refugee. To her, that word is heavy with shame and suffering, and she is quick to downplay her ordeal. It's true, despite all of the loss and trauma, that our family was profoundly lucky. But our history shaped us and continues to shape us today. When I was 8 years old, my grandmother took me to a Palestinian refugee camp outside Amman. It was important to her that I understand our family's journey, how easily things could have been different for us. At first, I was terrified. I'd never seen anything like this place. Rows and rows of tents shaking in the unrelenting desert wind, everything a slight shade of brown. My grandmother had brought things for the women at the camp, clothes and food, and she told me to go play while she visited with them. Still hiding behind her legs, I refused. I don't want to play, I said. I want to stay with you. My grandmother knelt down beside me, and with a sternness she seldom used, she said, "Don't you ever think these people are beneath you, and don't you think you have nothing to learn from them. Go." I did as I was told. I walked hesitantly to the sidelines of a pickup game of soccer on the camp's makeshift field. After a few moments, one of the kids waved me in, and soon my fear was gone, replaced by a feeling of camaraderie. These kids were no different from me, despite how they looked, or where they lived. After a few hours of playing, I ran to find my grandmother. I couldn't wait to tell her how much fun I'd had. I wanted her to be proud of me. "Haram," I said as we walked out of the camp. "Poor them." "Haram on us," my grandmother said, using the word in a different way, "that we were sinning. Don't feel sorry for them. Believe in them." Today, a staggering 70 million people have been forced to leave their homes due to war, persecution, or human rights violations, the highest level in recorded history. Only 0.01% of them will ever be resettled. These are numbers that are hard to get your head around and a problem that's too easy to dismiss as someone else's. Historically, the United States has admitted more refugees than any other country, but the number of people we resettle has been tumbling for years. From 2016 to 2020, refugee resettlement in America dropped nearly 85%, from approximately 85,000 people to slightly more than 11,000 at the end of the Trump administration. As I write this, the Biden administration appears to be reversing the course after critics slammed its initial 2021 refugee cap of 15,000, the lowest in history. You don't have to be particularly news savvy to read or hear the word refugee often. Yet the refugee resettlement system in the United States remains a mystery for many of us. Perhaps your community has a large Somali or Iraqi population. Perhaps you've always wondered how they came to live in your city. Here's how it typically unfolds in this country. After a years-long and invasive screening process, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees recommends an applicant for resettlement in the United States based on their circumstances and the danger that they face in their own home country. Each refugee or refugee family is then assigned to one of the 9 domestic resettlement agencies that have a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Department of State. Some of those agencies are familiar to us, large organizations like International Rescue Committee or Catholic Charities. Other are smaller affiliates. Their job is to facilitate refugees' journey to America and their first months in the country, picking them up at the airport, securing an apartment, and helping them find a job, checking all the logistical boxes. Resettlement agencies aren't created equal, though, and a positive experience often hinges on the tireless, thankless work of the resettlement workers. Today, the majority of refugees come from African countries, but that is largely due to the Trump administration's travel ban, a policy that sharply limited the number of refugees accepted from Syria, Yemen, and other places in the Middle East. Refugees are resettled in just about every state in the nation, and smaller cities like Columbus, Des Moines, Omaha, Fort Wayne, Louisville, Nashville, and the larger ones like New York, Houston, Atlanta, and Chicago. Visit any of these resettlement hubs and you'll likely find enclaves of Burmese, Afghan, or Eritrean refugees quietly forging new lives after surviving some of the world's most brutal conflicts. By the virtue of their refugee status, they are lucky. Lottery winner lucky. But resettlement is not a red carpet. It's not a free ride. Many of the cities where refugees wind up aren't prepared to welcome them. Their institutions and infrastructure woefully ill-equipped to facilitate successful resettlement. Many refugees spend their first years in America contending with crippling loneliness, crumbling apartment buildings, and school systems that have no idea what to do with them or their children. Belonging, healing, hope, there are no checkboxes for those things. More than a third of refugees are children. Their introduction to the United States comes in newcomer centers, academic programs funded and administered by local school districts where, in theory, kids receive help learning to read and write in English before being placed in general education classrooms. Like resettlement agencies, newcomer centers are often overwhelmed, understaffed, and suffer from ill-defined standards and vague mission statements. This is evident in the performance of refugee students once they're mainlined into traditional schools, where they face language barriers and bullying and are 5 times more likely to drop out than their native peers. But I didn't know any of this that day in the parking lot where I met those kids playing soccer. I didn't realize that these stories were playing out all around me in my own American city, that refugee hands had cleaned my hotel rooms and packaged my chicken, that the players I coached sat next to refugee students in their urban classrooms. Even though I was a foreign-born daughter of refugees, those 70 million people were just numbers to me too, until I learned their names. This book goes on to talk about Luma's experiences both as a refugee and also coaching and educating refugees, and it is jam-packed with insight, with both heartbreaking and inspiring stories, and I learned so much from it, and I really think that it's a great read for all teachers, no matter where you teach. You're going to be able to take away some powerful lessons and things, even just insights, things that you can know now that you have, or have a glimmer of knowing now that you've read these experiences. So pick up a copy of Learning America, read the rest, maybe listen to it if you're an audiobook reader like I am. Thanks for doing this a little bit differently with me this week. If you like this, if you want me to share more teacher reads for you, it's an idea that I'm toying with. So let me know in the comments below if you like the idea, if you have suggestions or requests. And yeah, I'll see you and your students here again next time for another First Chapter Friday video. Happy reading, happy teaching.
To continue reading Learning America by Luma Mufleh, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box below. Then be sure to like this video and subscribe. If you'd like teaching ideas delivered straight to your inbox twice a month, sign up with the link below.